This is Ross Feingold on Taiwan Hashtag, coming to you from Taipei, Taiwan, hosted by Storm Media. Today we'll be talking about the latest effort by China to influence Taiwan's upcoming presidential and legislative yuan, the parliament election on January 11, 2020. Yes, coming soon. We're now within a couple of months of the election, and there's lots of speculation about China trying to interfere in Taiwan's election. There's a lot of talk about what China does on social media. There's the obvious efforts by China to constrict Taiwan's international space, such as by persuading countries to de-recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan and establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. Most recent examples being Solomon Islands and Kiribati. But what's been in the news here in Taiwan over the last 10 days was the recent announcement by the Chinese government of 26 incentives aimed at Taiwan companies doing business in China, operations in China, such as factories, manufacturing, services industry, as well as Taiwan citizens who live in China. How many Taiwan nationals live in the People's Republic of China? We don't really know. We can only go by estimates. There was a government official who, during questioning in the legislature earlier this week, said there were 400,000. Some media reports say 1 million. Why is there such a big difference? Well, a lot of Taiwan nationals who live in China might be living there long term, but maybe they aren't doing so with residency permits. They might be living there on visitor visas, for example. So it's very hard to capture what the actual number is. We can only make estimates. So it's somewhere between 400,000 and maybe as high as 1 million. We have to take into account also that there could be students, there could be spouses, children of people living there. So sometimes it's really hard to calculate what the true number is, but be that as it may, there's clearly many hundreds of thousands of Taiwan nationals living in China. So the Chinese government has aimed some of these incentives at the individuals, not only at the corporates, but we have incentives aimed at individuals. What are these 26 incentives? Before we get back to that, let's just take a step back and look at what happened in February of 2018, a year and a half ago, or a little more than a year and a half ago. China issued 31 incentives aimed at Taiwan companies and individuals. Guess what? The new 26 are basically similar to the 31 that were issued last year. A lot of this has to do with equal access for Taiwan companies to opportunities in China, whether it's public projects, bidding, financial incentives, subsidies, tax incentives, things like that. These are basically business facilitation issues where the Chinese government is saying, we're going to treat Taiwan companies equally to how we treat Chinese companies. Well, you know what? This is not a big surprise. Governments around the world offer incentives to foreign investors all the time. I would say Taiwan, fear not. Just because some Taiwan companies might take advantage of some of these incentives, it doesn't mean they will. It doesn't mean that China is an attractive investment destination for Taiwan companies or that Taiwan is less attractive simply because China offers these incentives. Ultimately, business owners are going to do what's best for the company, for their shareholders, for their bottom line. It's not a zero-sum game. In fact, the Taiwan government has been talking continuously this year about its incentive program to get Taiwan companies to return from China to Taiwan. And the government is talked continuously about how successful that program is. So the Taiwan government estimates over $20 billion US dollars, 700 billion Taiwan dollars in investment capital commitments have been made by Taiwan companies to bring their money back from China. Now, of course, this description is a little bit inaccurate. They're not necessarily bringing money back from China. So a lot of this is new investment that they'll be doing in Taiwan. They've committed to do in Taiwan because the government is offering incentives. What kind of incentives? Discounted land, discounted loans. In fact, the loans are so discounted there's almost no interest. Companies are going to take advantage of that. reductions or elimination of certain restrictions on foreign labor. So if you build a new factory under this program in Taiwan, you can import more foreign labor. Taiwan has many hundreds of thousands of laborers from countries in Southeast Asia, such as the Philippines and Indonesia. So the government has a lot of incentives to encourage companies to make new investment here. Again, it gets marketed or packaged as return investment from China. Commitment is over 20 billion. Not all of that has been deployed. In fact, probably very little of it has been actually deployed yet, but companies in the government have made announcements about some of these proposed or planned investments. So yes, it's good for Taiwan. We certainly welcome these companies to come back. But if these incentive programs are such a success, no need to fear China's new incentives for Taiwan companies. In fact, last year, after China announced those 31 incentives, the government here in Taiwan, a few months later, they announced their counter incentives. It actually was repackaging many existing incentive programs. Some companies may have taken advantage of it. But the important thing is, after a few months, nobody was really talking about it. Nobody here in Taiwan was saying, well, those 31 incentives in 2018 really worked to to China's advantage. In fact, again, it didn't really impact the Taiwan economy or the perceptions of people in Taiwan towards China, which increasingly is negative because of China's other behavior towards Taiwan. Now, the DPP did very poorly in last November's local election, but that has to do with issues of policy execution here in Taiwan. Has nothing to do with those 31 incentives in 2018 that were aimed at Taiwan companies and individuals. So here we go again, 26 more incentives issued by the China government. We see a lot of angry response from Taiwan government, President Tsai, the Mainland Affairs Council, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They're all saying this is an effort by China to influence the election. Well, if it's an effort by China to influence the election, it's not really working because President Tsai has such a large lead in the polls. So it seemed like a pretty desperate attempt by China to influence the election. So it's not really going to influence the election. President Tsai will win or lose the election based on her policy execution, not based on China's new 26 incentives aimed at Taiwan companies or Taiwan individuals. President Tsai, you probably don't need to worry about this so much. The one that Taiwan probably should focus on or worry a little bit more about is this one of the 26 incentives that says Taiwan citizens traveling around the world who are in need of consular assistance are welcome to go to the People's Republic of China embassies or consulates. And understandably, that made the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Taiwan a bit upset. They said, no, thank you. We don't need that. Our citizens can be supported by our representative offices, or in a small number of countries, embassies around the world. And it's true, Taiwan does have representative offices in capitals or major cities around the world. They can provide consular assistance. It's also true that this isn't really something new. Why isn't it new? Because there are plenty of examples historically when Taiwan citizens were in need of some sort of consular support around the world, and either willingly or the Chinese embassy took the initiative to say, we'll help you. Did the Taiwan person welcome that? Well, it really depends on the situation. I mean, there are some examples of military conflict where Taiwan citizens were in need of consular support evacuation. The Chinese embassy said, hey, we'll help you. There's some more recent examples of typhoons, such as in Japan in recent years, where, again, there was rumors or claims that the Chinese embassy was welcoming Taiwanese to get on the bus or other evacuation services that the Chinese embassy or consulates were providing to Chinese citizens. And they said, Taiwan nationals, you could come on board as well. No surprise, that's part of United Front tactics by China. It doesn't mean that Taiwan is going to really suffer. You know, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just do your work. Make sure that Taiwan nationals know about your level of support, that your representative offices and staff around the world can provide sufficient support to citizens of Taiwan who are in need of consular assistance. And then you won't have to worry about the possibility that Taiwan nationals are going to seek the support of the PRC embassies or consulate. From the reaction here in Taiwan, you would think that China's already invaded. So I would say don't overreact. You have nothing to fear. Taiwan, on the economic side, the growth numbers, the GDP numbers, according to the government, very positive. The third quarter GDP number that the government announced, it beat all the estimates of the investment banks. Again, the return, that, as they call it, investment from China, already over $20 billion. No need to think that Chinese incentives are going to persuade these Taiwan companies not to invest in Taiwan. It's not a zero-sum game. On the personal incentives, the individual incentives, look, those several 100,000 people living in China already, if they're going to take advantage of an incentive that lets them open bank accounts or online payments, things like that easier, well, so be it. That any foreign national living in China is probably going to be inclined to take advantage of things that make their lives easier. That doesn't mean they're disloyal to Taiwan. I mean, they've already made their decision to live in China temporarily or even long-term for work, and that is their right. But that doesn't mean that they're actively working against Taiwan's national security. I mean, as an expatriate myself, I know that we shouldn't demonize or criminalize people who decide to live overseas, as several 100,000 Taiwan citizens have chosen to live in China. But the best thing for the government here in Taiwan to do is to ensure that they know that Taiwan still loves them. They're welcome to come back to Taiwan at any time. Outside of China, the government will provide consular services through the Taiwan representative offices or embassies. There's no need to go to the PRC embassy or consulate. But is this really going to impact the election? Is this a way for China to influence the election result? It doesn't look like it, given President Tsai's large lead in the polls. So although there's a lot of overreaction, a lot of media attention, we even see that the PRC media was saying, Wan Taiwan, Huijia, come on back to joining the mainland. It's getting a lot of play from the Chinese side. I would say Taiwan, no need to fear, no need to overreact. Keep doing what you're doing. That makes Taiwan a great place to invest in, to live. I'm Ross Feingold, and you've been watching Taiwan Hashtag.